She was 22 years old, a free spirit from Long Island with paint-stained hands, a camera around her neck, and a dream she was building one Instagram post at a time. She had a converted white van, a fiancé she'd loved since high school, and a YouTube channel called Nomadic Static that she believed was going to take her somewhere. And on paper, it looked like it already had. The photos were beautiful. The landscapes were breathtaking. The couple in the frame looked happy, sun-kissed, deeply in love. But there is a version of a life people show the world, and there is the version happening inside the frame. The one the camera doesn't capture. The one that happens in the silences between Instagram posts, in the texts written and deleted, in the moments when a woman sits in the back of a police car, crying, and tries to make herself smaller so no one figures out what's really going on. Gabby Petito was living both of those lives at the same time, and in the summer of 2021, one of them swallowed the other whole. Her full name was Gabrielle Venora Petito. She was born in March 1999 in Blue Point, New York, a quiet, waterfront community in Suffolk County on Long Island. The kind of suburb where kids ride bikes to the beach and everybody knows everybody's name. She grew up there, the eldest of 6 children, raised by parents who later described her as bubbly, artistic, and loving. Her father, Joe Petito, said he remembered melting the moment he looked at her. He said she had him wrapped around her finger from day one. After her parents separated amicably, she lived primarily with her mother, Nicole Schmidt, and stepfather, Jim Schmidt, but she remained close to her father and stepmother, Tara. It was a family that, by all accounts, was full of warmth and showed up for each other. She grew up with a large circle of friends, a natural ease around people, and what her childhood friend, Tori Moretti, later described as a quality that lit up every room she entered. From the time she was a teenager, it was clear that Gabby Petito was not someone who was going to stay in one place. She was restless in the best way, curious, drawn to beauty and to movement. She wanted to see things, make things, document things. She had an artist's eye before she ever picked up a camera. She attended Bayport Blue Point High School, and it was there, somewhere between hallways and lunch breaks, and the ordinary machinery of adolescence, that she met a boy named Brian Laundrie. He lived less than 2 miles from her house, close enough to be neighbors, but from a different world. He grew up in a modest home on the other side of the train tracks that quite literally divided their neighborhoods. He was soft-spoken, artistic. Nicole Schmidt later said she liked him. She thought he was interesting, that he got along with Gabby's younger siblings and seemed like a nice person. There was nothing in those early days that raised a flag. In March 2019, Gabby, then 19, and Brian, then 20, began dating. She had spent a stretch of time after high school living in Carolina Beach, North Carolina, working as a hostess and waitress, exploring what independence felt like. When things with Brian got serious, she made a significant decision. She left New York and moved to Florida to be closer to his family, who had relocated to Northport a couple of years earlier. She and Brian moved in together, into his parents' home. She left her own family, her hometown, her roots. She built her entire daily life around him and his world. She was working as a pharmacy technician, saving money, learning photography, building something. Her Instagram page, under the handle @GabsPetito, began to grow. She described herself in her bio as a lover of art, yoga, and veggies. She linked to her YouTube channel, Nomadic Static. She was trying to become a travel influencer, to document a life in motion, to make a career out of adventure. They were young and in love, and building something real. But the people closest to her were beginning to notice something. A pattern, a weight she carried. Brian was controlling in ways that were quiet and therefore easy to dismiss. He monitored what she wore. He was guarded about who she spent time with. Her friend and later one of the most important voices in understanding this story, a woman named Rose Davis, recalled instances that now, in retrospect, read like a textbook on coercive control. One night, Brian didn't want Gabby going out line dancing with Davis, so he took her ID. She was devastated, sobbing. But then Davis said he would do something generous and sweet, and Gabby would snap back into believing she was the lucky one. He was cycling through the pattern that experts call intermittent reinforcement. Punishment and reward, until the person on the receiving end can no longer tell which version of reality is true. In her journal, in an undated entry, Gabby wrote, "Brian, you know how much I love you. Just please stop crying and stop calling me names. You in pain is killing me." In a text she sent him, "Don't try to control me because it only makes me mad. I love you so much, but it's the way you speak to me that hurts me most. These are not the words of someone who doesn't see what's happening. They're the words of someone who sees it, names it, and then stays. Because leaving is complicated, and because love is real even when it coexists with harm, and because every cycle of cruelty is followed by a version of the man you fell in love with in the first place. She quit her job. They planned the trip. The van was a 2012 Ford Transit, converted and equipped for life on the road. The route would cover thousands of miles through national parks across the American West: Zion, Bryce Canyon, Grand Teton, Yellowstone. She documented her preparations on social media with the kind of energy that comes from genuinely believing something beautiful is ahead. On July 2nd, 2021, they left Florida. Within weeks, what she had built her whole public identity around, the perfect couple, the dream life, the open road, would begin to fracture in ways that no filter could hide. Their first published YouTube video went up on August 19th and covered footage from their early weeks on the road. Monument Rocks in Kansas, the red arches of Utah, the sweeping skies of the West. The comments were full of envy. People watching saw exactly what she wanted them to see. On August 12, 2021, in Moab, Utah, someone outside a grocery store called 911. The caller reported seeing a man hit a woman and attempt to take her phone and leave her stranded. Police located the white van near the entrance to Arches National Park and pulled it over. The body camera footage that was later released showed a visibly distraught Gabby sitting in the back of a police cruiser, crying, her mascara streaked, her voice breaking as she tried to explain what had been a building argument that had escalated. She told officers it was her OCD and her anxiety. She said she hit Brian in the arm first when she was trying to get his attention. She minimized everything that had happened, took on the blame, made herself the problem. This is what victims of coercive control often do when confronted by authority. Not because they are lying, but because the relationship has conditioned them. The officers spoke to both of them separately for nearly an hour. Brian was composed, collected, and calm in the way that people who have practiced managing appearances tend to be. The police noted cuts and scrapes on his face. A released photo of Gabby, taken moments before the stop, shows something that doesn't appear in the body camera footage: bruising and blood on her face. A witness had reported seeing a man hit a woman. The physical evidence of injury was on Gabby, and yet, when the officers conferred amongst themselves, one asked, "Is there a way to not do anything on this?" They labeled the incident a mental and emotional episode rather than a domestic assault. Gabby's parents would later file a lawsuit against the Moab City Police Department. Her father, Joe Petito, said Moab's response and attitude was infuriating. He said, "This case has never been about money. It has always been about seeking accountability and fighting for change that will save lives." Nicole Schmidt's voice broke when she talked about it publicly. She said her daughter should still be here. She said, "There are laws put in place to protect victims, and those laws were not followed, and we don't want this to happen to anybody else." But in August 2021, none of that accountability had come yet. After the Moab stop, the trip continued. They drove north through Wyoming. On August 24th, Gabby and her mother Nicole spoke over FaceTime. By that point, they were heading toward Grand Teton National Park. It was one of the last times Nicole would see her daughter's face. On August 27th, the couple arrived in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. They had lunch at a restaurant called the Mary Piglet, and a woman dining nearby, Nina Seeley Angelo, later told ABC News what she witnessed. She said Brian was screaming at the hostess, that Gabby was in tears and apologizing, that it looked like they were almost getting kicked out. She said Brian was very visibly angry and that Gabby seemed distraught. That meal at the Mary Piglet was the last confirmed sighting of Gabby Petito, alive. On August 30th, Nicole Schmidt received a text from Gabby's phone. It said, "No service in Yosemite. The spelling of Yosemite was wrong. They weren't near Yosemite." The wording didn't sound like Gabby. Nicole later told investigators the message felt off. Another text came through saying everything was fine. Gabby's name was in the sender field, but nothing about it felt like her daughter. The FBI would later determine that Brian Laundrie had been using Gabby's phone to send messages to her family after her death, creating the impression deliberately that she was still alive. On September 1st, 2021, Brian Laundrie pulled the white van into his parents' driveway in Northport, Florida. He was alone. He had Gabby's van, Gabby's belongings, and Gabby's debit card, which the FBI later confirmed he had used without authorization on the drive back from Wyoming. He had also transferred $700 from her account. He walked into his parents' house and said nothing about where Gabby was. His parents said nothing either. The days that followed are some of the most surreal in this entire case. Gabby's family was trying to reach her. Brian wasn't answering their calls. They reached out through every channel. And finally, on September 11th, 10 days after Brian returned without her, Nicole Schmidt filed a missing persons report with the Suffolk County Police. Department in New York. At that point, Brian had already retained an attorney. When police arrived at the Northport home to ask questions, the attorney issued a statement on behalf of the Laundrie family expressing hope that Gabby would be found. Brian himself said nothing. Not a word. Not to police. Not to Gabby's parents, who were breaking apart trying to understand what had happened to their daughter. What happened in those 10 days between his return and the missing persons report matters enormously, because every one of those days was a day the search couldn't begin. Every day he stayed silent. Gabby was somewhere in the Wyoming wilderness, alone, gone, and nobody was looking yet. The internet became the investigation. The hashtag #FindGabby exploded across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. The case attracted a level of media attention that was, by nearly every measure, unprecedented for a missing persons case. Armchair detectives pored over every frame of her YouTube videos, every geotag on her Instagram posts, every piece of publicly available information. Her name was mentioned 844 times on national television in a single week. CNN devoted the first 16 minutes of a primetime broadcast to her disappearance. 2 Wyoming campers who had seen the headlines watched back their own vacation footage and realized they had accidentally recorded Gabby's white van at the Spread Creek campsite. They came forward, and that lead was what ultimately led searchers to the right location. On September 19, 2021, law enforcement found human remains at the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Bridger-Teton National Forest, Wyoming. Gabby Petito's stepfather, Jim Schmidt, who had traveled from New York to Wyoming to help in the search, was the one who had to identify her. He later described finding her in the fetal position, lying on the ground for weeks, in the wild, left there by someone who was supposed to love her. The Teton County coroner subsequently ruled her death a homicide. The cause of death, blunt force injuries to the head and neck, with manual strangulation. She had been there for approximately 3 weeks. She was 22 years old. The day after her body was found, Brian Laundrie went into the Myakkahatchee Creek Environmental Park near his parents' home in Florida. His parents reported him missing on September 17th. Law enforcement began an extensive search. For weeks, the area was partially flooded, which delayed the effort. On October 20th, 2021, his parents drove to the park before dawn, walked into the brush, and his father stumbled upon a dry bag in a clearing. Nearby, searchers separately found what turned out to be Brian Laundrie's skeletal remains. He had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He had been there, submerged by floodwater, since approximately September 13th, roughly a week before Gabby's body was even found. In January 2022, the FBI announced that a notebook recovered near Brian's remains contained a written confession. The full contents were later released. In it, Brian described a version of events in which Gabby had fallen while crossing a stream in the dark, hit her head, and was suffering. He wrote that he carried her, tried to warm her, and then made a choice. His words were, "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted. But I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock," he added. "From the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her." Experts and investigators responded to the confession with deep skepticism. The coroner's finding of blunt force injuries and manual strangulation tells a different story than an accidental fall followed by a mercy killing. And even in his confession, even knowing he was about to die, he could not bring himself to use the word murdered. He wrote, "I ended her life, not I killed her." As a criminal profiler who later commented on the note put it, he tiptoed around the confession. He couldn't admit what he had done, even in his last words. The FBI ultimately determined that Brian Laundrie was the only person directly involved in Gabby Petito's death. There was no trial, there was no verdict. There was a notebook found in a swamp and a woman left in the wilderness, and an answer that arrived too late to matter in any legal sense. The case was closed, but everything around it was just beginning. The wall-to-wall coverage of Gabby's disappearance sparked a conversation that was long overdue and deeply uncomfortable. Because while the entire nation was watching CNN and refreshing hashtags and weeping over a missing 22-year-old from Long Island, other families were sitting in silence, wondering why their daughters, their sisters, their mothers had never received even a fraction of that attention. The phrase was coined years earlier by the late journalist Gwen Ifill, missing white woman syndrome. The disproportionate media coverage given to missing persons cases when the victim is young, white, and conventionally attractive, while cases involving women and girls of color are largely ignored. In Wyoming alone, the same state where Gabby went missing, 710 indigenous people had been reported missing in the decade between 2011 and 2020. 466 of them were indigenous women. The country learned about virtually none of them. Approximately 90,000 people are missing in the United States at any given moment. Gabby Petito's case generated 1.4 billion views on TikTok alone. The math of who gets seen and who doesn't is not random, it is a pattern. And Gabby's case didn't create that pattern. It reflected it with a clarity that was impossible to look away from. Ironically and importantly, the massive search effort for Gabby, and later for Brian inadvertently, led to the discovery of 5 other unrelated, missing persons, including a woman of color who had been missing for months. She was found because the resources and attention that had flooded Wyoming in September 2021 brought enough personnel into the field to find her too. It is a bittersweet detail that says everything about what focused attention and resources can accomplish, and why the absence of that attention, for so many others, is a different kind of tragedy running parallel to this one. Gabby Petito's parents have refused to let her story fade. They established the Gabby Petito Foundation to support victims of domestic violence and to help all people who are missing, explicitly including those who haven't received the attention their daughter did. They have given interviews, participated in documentaries, and continued to push for legislative accountability, particularly around the failures at the Moab traffic stop. Nicole Schmidt has spoken publicly about that stop more than once, her voice barely holding together, because she believes that if those officers had followed the law that day, her daughter might still be alive. The Moab City Police Department has disputed that characterization in legal filings, calling the family's lawsuit a money grab. Joe Petito responded to that characterization by saying it was infuriating. He said his daughter's name means more than that. Netflix's 3-part documentary, American Murder, Gabby Petito, released in 2025, brought the case back to a new generation of viewers and revealed footage and testimony that added new dimensions to an already devastating story. It dismantled, carefully and deliberately, the curated image the couple had built on social media and placed it alongside the darker reality that was hiding underneath. Rose Davis, Brian's friend who had witnessed the controlling behavior firsthand, appeared to describe the cycle as she had watched it unfold. Gabby's parents spoke about what they had missed and what they wished they had known. It was the kind of documentary that doesn't let you look away, because it keeps insisting that the warning signs were always there, and the question it keeps asking, quietly, relentlessly, is why weren't they enough? There are things about this case that linger. The image of Gabby in the body camera footage, sitting in the back of a police car, telling the officers that she was the problem, that her anxiety was the issue, that she hit him first. She was working so hard to keep him out of trouble. Even in that moment, exhausted and visibly hurt and speaking to people whose job it was to protect her, she was protecting him. That is what coercive control does. It doesn't just frighten its victims. It rearranges their entire understanding of where the danger lives. There is the text message Nicole Schmidt received on August 30th that didn't sound like her daughter. The wrong spelling, the strange phrasing. She knew. She felt it immediately, and she kept trying to reach Gabby anyway, holding on to the possibility that she was wrong, because the alternative was something no parent can prepare themselves for. There is Brian, sitting composed and calm at the side of the road in Moab while Gabby cried in the police car, and an officer saying, "Is there a way to not do anything on this?" There is a law that says what should have happened. There is what actually happened. And there is the 37-day gap between that August afternoon and the day Gabby's family got an answer. There is Jim Schmidt identifying his stepdaughter's body in Wyoming, later saying she had been left like a piece of trash by someone who was supposed to love her. There is Gabby in her journal writing, "Just please stop calling me names." There is Gabby in a text. "It's the way you speak to me that hurts me most." She named it, she felt it, she tried to address it, and she stayed. Not because she was naive, but because leaving is rarely as simple as the word sounds. Because she loved him. Because the cycle made her doubt herself. Because she was 22 years old and building a dream. And she believed that the version of him she loved was the real one. What she couldn't have known, what most people in those situations don't know until it's too late, is that for certain people, love and control aren't opposites. They are the same impulse wearing different clothes. And when the control fails, when the person you've been monitoring and isolating and wearing down starts to become fully themselves again, some people cannot tolerate it. They would rather have nothing than have less than everything. Gabby Petito is buried in Blue Point, New York, where she grew up. The community put up a mural of her with angel wings. Teal ribbons line the street where she used to ride her bike. Her former coworker at a cafe in Patchogue said she was always the first to help someone. Said she was just such a light. Said anywhere she went, the room lit up. She wanted to be a travel influencer. She wanted to document the world's beauty. She wanted to build a life in motion. She had all of that in front of her. She was 22 years old. She had a YouTube channel with subscribers who were just beginning to find her. She had a mother who FaceTimed her from New York and a father who said she had him wrapped around her finger since the first day. She had a stepdad who got on a plane and flew to Wyoming and walked into a search with everything he had. She had a journal. She had a camera. She had a voice. And if her story does anything, if the documentaries and the hashtags and the lawsuits and the conversations that her name keeps, starting every time they come back around, mean anything, let it be this. The Washington signs she lived with are not exotic or rare. They are common. They are in relationships right now, in apartments and houses and converted vans across this country, and they are being minimized and explained away and dismissed by partners and friends, and sometimes even by the people whose job it is to see them. Gabby's mother said it in court filings and in interviews and on television, her voice barely holding. We don't want this to happen to anybody else. That sentence has become the foundation of the work her family continues to do in Gabby's name. It is the reason they show up. It is the reason they keep talking. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 1-800-799-7233. If something in this story felt familiar, please use it. Thank you for watching. If this moved you, share it. Because the conversation Gabby's case keeps forcing open is one that saves lives, and it needs to keep going.